Hello and welcome to Talking Open for Climate Justice, a limited-run podcast series created by Western Michigan University Libraries. I'm your host, Sarah Volmering, and this week we're shining a light on open access and how it helps foster solutions for some of the greatest challenges facing our planet. In this episode, we continue our conversation with two librarians from Western Michigan University, Michele Behr and Daria Orlowska. In part 1, we discussed open access, what it is, how it got started, and recent changes to U.S. policies that have global implications. We'll continue exploring open access and its global impact in this episode. For people that aren't in academia, what is the traditional publishing process like?
So it's very complicated. So for the most part in academia, people want to publish in peer review because, that indicates that your research has been vetted by people who know your subject area. And so, certainly publishing in a peer review outlet of some sort, whether it's a peer reviewed conference or a peer reviewed journal, is really what people, at this level want to do. And so, for the most part, you have an idea of a study. Often you have colleagues that you're working with, you come up with your research problems. So it can be a variety of different scenarios where you've published a study and then you go looking to publish it. Or, in some cases you might be invited to publish, we're doing a special issue on X. And so you may be invited to contribute something to that. Essentially, there's, all sorts of, pathways to get to this, but you have something that you want to share with the world that you want to publish. And so you go looking for an outlet. And, so in most cases, within your field, there may only be a handful of publications that would really be interested in what, depending on how specific your research is. Or in some cases, people want to publish outside their discipline because it's something, interdisciplinary, or really they want to talk to a different audience about whatever it is that they've published. So for whatever your kind of requirements are, as far as finding a publication, and then usually you look to see the reputation. So there's all sorts of metrics that are used as far as publications, kind of reputability of publications. We could go on for hours about all the different ways to measure the, kind of the reputability or the reach of a publication. And so people look for that and then submit. And then, some journals have extremely low acceptance rates. So, they may have an 8% acceptance rate, which means that 92% of people who submit a paper to publish in that journal are rejected. You may have to try multiple publications before you get something accepted.
And I think the other thing to really highlight is that this is a very long process, right? When Michele was talking about peer reviewers, those are usually experts within the field that come in, and sometimes it's reviewed double blind, so they don't know who is submitting the article and you don't know who the peer reviewers are. Sometimes there's different situations, but they can come back and be like, okay, we'll conditionally accept your manuscript, but you have to make these revisions. And that back and forth can take a lot of time. So there's a lot of extra things that you don't think about when it comes to, okay, I did a research study, I'm finished writing up the results. Before it actually gets to being put up somewhere, there's a lot of time that elapses. And if you kind of think back to open access and where the taxpayer money is going, like you have the researcher who gets the grant, and so it goes there. Then you have the publisher who asks people to peer review for free, because usually people who peer review are other experts who are doing it as service. Then you have the institutional library who pays for the subscription to get access to the journal if it's not open access, or you have the researcher who actually pays the fee to make it open access. And there's also a possibility that the taxpayer needs to pay the fee to access the manuscript if they don't have a relationship with an institution that pays for it already. So yeah, lots of time, lots of money that go into that process.
And these days, a lot of times people want to publish open access, either because their funder is requiring them to publish open access, or because they're, the topic they think is really important to be shared with people who don't have subscriptions, or, they want to share it with people who aren't going to come up with a paywall in order to read their research. And then the other thing is, here in academia, kind of goes back to the metrics where people want their stuff to be cited. I mean, one of the ways that if you're going up for tenure or you're applying for another job, that you want to show the impact of your research. And so if you publish open access, your chances are higher that other people are going to find it, they're going to build on it, they're going to cite you, they're going to talk about you, they're going to, so that's another reason why people often look for open access.
It's interesting how easy it is to take for granted the privilege of having access to a research library. There's so many layers, not only in getting something published, but getting access to it. It requires the work of a lot of different people to make it happen, and a lot of money too. It's one of the reasons why open access is a positive movement, so research is more available to people around the world. I want to talk a bit about data, open data, and what it's like for researchers to find and use data that's already out there.
Yeah, so in short, it's also complicated, right? So historically, when researchers would put data out there, which it didn't happen very often, they would usually rely on the supplemental information within a journal. So when you're publishing an article within a journal, you can sometimes add additional things to it, like figures, charts, data sets, tables, and such. The thing is that journals never had an obligation to retain that supplemental information. And that supplemental information never received a sort of identifier the same way that a journal did. So a journal usually gets a DOI, and that's like a digital object identifier, a persistent identifier that even if the article is taken down or moves, it's going to follow it. And there's always going to be some record that it existed. Supplemental information never received that. And because journals didn't have an obligation to keep it, a lot of the times it was very difficult to find or it got removed. And so there is a push to have researchers submit their data into data repositories. Sometimes they take the form of institutional data repositories. That's if an institution has something set up to collect that data and make it fair, which is what we talk about, that data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. These basic guiding principles to make it easy for other people to find it and make sense of it and reuse it for their own work. So that's one option, institutional data repositories. There's also generalist data repositories. I've mentioned Figshare as one of them. Those are repositories that will accept any sort of scholarship, data included, regardless of discipline. And then you have specialist repositories, which are discipline specific. And a good example of that is ICPSR.
The ICPSR stands for the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. It's a membership organization dedicated to the collection and preservation of all types of social sciences data. It provides open access to the data that they collect from disciplines like political science, history, sociology, and economics. The data consists mainly of raw, machine-readable data sets collected by surveys conducted by government agencies, universities, and other research organizations. ICPSR preserves and provides documentation and access to these data resources in order to make them available for a variety of uses and further analysis.
ICPSR, which is discipline specific for social science and political data. And they have a system set up where you're depositing your data set and it's curated so that there's someone looking at it and making sure that all the metadata is there, so it is findable and it is presented in a way that is consistent with all the other data sets up there. So yeah, it can live all over the place. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Ideally, it lives in a data repository somewhere because that's the best place to store the data because they're set up in a way that mints those DOIs, those persistent identifiers that will stay there no matter where the data goes, and that has a structure that makes metadata easier to list so that it is more findable. And it is usually indexed by Google or by another search engine so that if someone is searching for it on the internet, they can find it. But yeah, it sometimes gets really complicated, especially if things live in different places. So you can have scholarships that like articles that are living in a journal and then data that lives in a repository, and like where's the link there? So sometimes authors will create a data availability statement at the bottom of their article being like, my data is available at this repository, here's the DOI. But sometimes it's a lot more nebulous, like you can obtain the data by request. You have to email me, and then the person needs to figure out what is the most up-to-date email, like where did that author go, like are they still, will they even have the data in an available format that is not like on tape somewhere in a garage. So it can become quite complicated, and ideally we would like to move towards the idea of putting your data into repositories that are made for that.
I think it's complicated is the running theme when talking about research and data. For someone that's not a researcher, it can be a little complicated to navigate, which brings me to my next question. As librarians, part of your role is to help people find information. What do you think is the role of librarians in helping the public and researchers find, use, and publish open access?
I feel like part of what sort of the value added that we bring is, it's sort of like setting people up for success. Like I feel like there are things that we do, like Daria mentioned, like OrcID, for instance, which is a researcher ID. If you have one of those, it's really going to help people figure out your research, especially if you've ever changed your name or you've published under, maybe middle initial or not. It's kind of a nuts and bolts kind of a thing, but it makes a big difference. And so that's one of those things that we really recommend that people do. So sort of best practices and sort of getting the best reward for the research that you're doing. So if we can help you publish open access, again, that that's going to improve your ability to showcase your what you're doing and the impact that it's made. So again, if you're an academic and you want to go for tenure, or you want to apply for another job, or you just want to really help solve the problem of whatever it is your research is working on. So I think that what we can do is help people, like I said, set themselves up for success, get the most return on their investment as far as the reach of their research. And also, just kind of help with some of the burdens along the way. Like, okay, how am I supposed to come up with this author processing fee, which is what you have to pay if you publish open access? Well, maybe we can help you find a grant, or maybe we can help you find something that has a less of a fee that would also be, a good outlet for your research. So I think we can, kind of help people throughout the whole process. So in some cases, there are only a few journals that you publish in, and people in your department have been doing it for years and they help you through it. But I think in other cases, like I said, maybe you have a need, you want to publish outside your field. You want to publish this research, and you want to, maybe I designed a device for, some health issue, and I really want to publish it in a physical therapy journal because I really want, physical therapists to know about what this research is. So in those cases where you're less familiar, where the researcher is less familiar with the research in that area, I think those are ways that we can really help.
And in terms of additional services that we offer here to WMU affiliates, we offer if you have published a manuscript in a journal and you are not interested in paying the gold access fees to make it open access to everyone, we can help you upload your article to ScholarWorks, which Michele mentioned is our institutional repository, and figure out what you're allowed to upload, whether that's the preprint, the accepted manuscript, the final manuscript. Will help you figure that out. In terms of data, I'm happy to sit down with someone and help look at their data set in terms of if they want to deposit it into a repository, and do you have everything that you need here, where you can deposit it based on your needs. I'm happy to sit down and help individuals find data, secondary data that they're looking for in order to reuse it for their projects, because maybe they don't have the time or the money to run their own research study and instead want to reuse something. So that's another service we offer. So we really try to support everyone at all phases of the data lifecycle here, whether that's, you're starting off and you're writing a grant and you need to write a data management plan to tell funding agencies how you're planning to manage your data during the active phase of your research, and then what you're going to do with it after you're done, or figuring out structures that you can set up so that things are kind of clean in an organized fashion that can help you transition into creating that final data set for publication.
My final question is going to bring us back around again to climate justice. Thinking about everything we've covered in our conversation, is there anything about climate justice and open access that gives you hope?
I think what gives me hope is that we're moving in the right direction. I do see signs of hope. It's a glass half full kind of a thing, that there's so much work to be done. But I do think there are signs, that are really moving in the right direction. And I think, like I mentioned before, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about open access is the idea that it really empowers people who don't have power. It really empowers people to have information. I mean, we're librarians, we're all about information, access to information. I mean, that's kind of our raison d'etre. And I think that, the idea of open access, particularly around climate justice, which is such a difficult problem to solve and has so many aspects to it, I think that moving in the direction of open access and kind of different ways to go about that, I really am seeing some positive signs there. So there are times when you sort of get depressed about how much still needs to be done, but I think that there really are a lot of signs that are moving in the right direction.
I'm also encouraged by the young people who aren't sitting there and being like, oh no, this is terrible. Like, they're going out and they're joining protests and they're talking about it and they're demanding change. And I think demanding change is what we need, right? We can't just idly sit by. We have to continue advocating. And it's great to see that people are very passionate about the topic and are continuing the conversation.
Thank you both so much for sharing your perspectives. It's been such an illuminating series, and it was great to end by bringing it back around to libraries who are advocating for open access to try to make an impact on the world. So thank you both so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Talking Open for Climate Justice, a podcast created by Western Michigan University Libraries for International Open Access Week. For more information about open access, visit our website, wmich.edu/library/open-access.